My guest today is Jackie Gallo, founder of Roots Academy in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, that she has grown from 6 kids in the fall of 2020 to 36 kids this fall in kindergarten through 5th grade. Roots Academy is a recognized private school in the state of Maine. And Jackie, I had the chance to meet when I visited microschools and creative learning models throughout Maine earlier this spring. So I'm thrilled to talk to you again, Jackie, and so glad that you are on the LiberatED podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Kerry. I'm pleased to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your backstory, Jackie, because I know that you were entrepreneurial even before you decided to become a school founder. You were running, I believe it was a yoga studio before COVID hit. So you were already a small business owner and then pivoted into being a school founder. But let's start with what kind of drew you to entrepreneurship in your early days?
Yeah, my background, I guess my formal background is in biology and economics. And so out of school, I worked in like clinical trials research. And I think in that area, what I really kind of honed and noticed about myself is I have a unique ability to look at a lot of information and really discern and distill like key important points from it. And so that's kind of how my brain works naturally. Um, so with that in mind, as I moved through my own adulthood and professional careers, what I noticed is that I would enter a situation and I would be learning, but my brain would always be distilling and discerning and looking for ways that this could be better, this could be different, asking questions, why are we doing things this way? And so once I had children and we start doing these things because we're being told to do these things, I couldn't help but ask those questions. And so a lot of times what those questions brought forward was really noticing a lack in particular areas, noticing that this might work for these people, but it doesn't work for my family. And really being curious about that. So I think the first place I kind of toe dipped into that, exploring what it looks like to, I don't see a solution, so creating one, I guess, would be in the field of like mindfulness and yoga for families. So it started, I opened up a small studio and brought in a variety of providers, so women's health professionals and people that supported families. And we worked with the local school district doing after school mindfulness and really hoping to integrate with our local public school, kind of thinking like, okay, we can kind of fill a void here and we can bring after school some of these things to our community. And I had been doing that for, I spent 7 months building a studio space and a brand and all of these things, and had been doing that for about 6 months before COVID happened. And my own child, who was in kindergarten at our local public school, and I'd kind of been watching her on that journey, and my brain was doing the thing of, okay, well, why are we doing it this way? Is this the best way to do it? And asking all of those questions. So school obviously stopped here in Maine, for all intents and purposes in March of that year. And the studio had to close because of the restrictions that were in place. So I had a kid and I had a space. And my brain was like, well, what happens if we put these two things together? I think I had a unique perspective, and my husband worked in emergency medicine, and he was kind of like, we need to plan long-term solutions here, not just like short-term, like let's get through the next 2 weeks kind of plan. And so it seemed like a natural fit to, I've got this space that was kind of built for kids. And I wonder if there's anybody else who's interested in just coming together for the next year and like weathering this together. Um, and
And
there
there
were.
was,
Was
right?
very quickly. I mean, I think I put together a one-page website, like just a landing page, and very quickly had found 5 other families, some of who were friends, but some who I had never met before and just were um, ready to take a leap and do something different, for whatever reason for the coming year. And so we had 6 students, and I had a friend who had left her teaching position prior to COVID happening. So she was available and looking for something different. And we came together. And that first year we went to school Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Tuesday and Thursday, we sent home, like, you can be working on this if you want, but go outside and do these things. And um, it was a magical year. I felt like everybody around us was struggling and felt kind of guilty. It was like, just keep our head down and nobody look at us because we're having the best year ever right now. And we kept going.
Yeah. So that first year, Jackie, were you running, it was essentially a pandemic pod, but were you running the program at the time as a private school, or was it just sort of a homeschool
Yeah,
co-op? What was the structure for that first
we
year?
were a recognized private school from the beginning.
Okay.
I managed to get connected. At that time, there weren't very many people running like small recognized private schools here in Maine. And I managed to get connected with somebody who spent 2 hours with me on the phone and like walked me through what they had been doing. And they had been doing it for years. They were working with a really specialized population of students. So walked me through the process. So just that conversation really, I felt like gave me a leg up in understanding how to position ourselves. Um, and having status as a private school, um, makes us accessible to a set of parents that is just outwardly intimidated by the phrase homeschooling.
Yeah.
Um, they can't imagine taking that responsibility on themselves. And so I think just that designation was a place of comfort for some folks in our community. So we fell into that category right from the beginning.
And so what was that first year like? Did you kind of piece together a curriculum? Did you sort of follow the kids' interests and desires? Like, what did you do for teaching and learning for that first year?
Yeah, I think we were lucky in that our student population were kinder and first grade. And so, as far as being able to follow their interest, you're really set up for success because that's most of their, like, if you look at standards or anything like that, and you're taking that into account, like, it was easy to check those boxes following their interests. So there was a lot of, you know, spending time in the woods or spending time in the classroom and then reflecting on what we had talked about and being like, okay, well, we've talked about this and this is where their interests are going. And what happens if we go here and explore that? And we were limited in our ability to obviously bring anyone into the classroom as far as community members or, take field trips, but we could go outside and we did that plenty. And so much of our learning, was rooted in what was around us. uh, and we live in an area where there's a lot of access to public trails, and we took advantage of that. And that really was, I think, healing for, like, as teachers, to be out there during a really stressful time in the forest with kids, and then getting to observe how they were able to access literacy and numeracy while playing, while moving their body, and ending the day not feeling totally burnt out. And so I think the first year was a tremendous experiment. Um, and but we also had space to kind of experiment because people just wanted their kids to be okay. And as
Hmm.
long as we were delivering on that, there was a lot of trust from the parents that were with us. So not only were they okay, but they learned, and everybody was sort of like, huh, maybe something different's possible.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's also what led you to sort of your vision of place-based education, right? Just sort of recognizing these abundant resources around you and wanting to connect young people to the natural world around them and also the people, places, and things in their community. So what happened next? I assume that word got around that this was this magical place and your enrollment grew and I know at some point outgrew the yoga studio. Tell us what happened in those kind of subsequent months.
Yeah, the very next year we moved into a bigger space. So the very next year, my friend who was teaching, kind of leading the kindergarten and first grade program, she was a preschool teacher at heart. And so she was like, I want to open my own preschool. And I was like, well, I feel like this elementary school thing is growing. And so we moved into a larger property together. And so she built out a 12 student preschool while we were running our small group. And we doubled enrollment the following year.
Wow.
So grew from 6 kids to 12. Yeah, so that was kind of the trajectory for that next year.
Okay. And so that was, now we're into the 2021 to 2022 school year.
Mhm.
And then what happened? Kind of going into
Um,
22 to 23.
yeah, that was, it was both the same and very different. We had twice as many kids, and our grade, we added a grade. So our oldest students grew with us, and we were K through 2. And so, really looking at exploring some intentional curriculums around math that year. And then also, we moved from, I think, something that like supported the increase in enrollment was moving from 3 days a week to 5 days a week to make
Mm.
it accessible to families who are working.
Yeah.
Um, and so, with that 5 days a week, we built in one day where we were out in the forest every day. So, carving out time so that access to place and gross motor movement and the ability to like connect with ourselves and our classmates in that way was built into every week. And so that's sort of what evolved and we worked through in that next year.
And then starting last year, fall of 2023, you moved into the beautiful space that you're in now, right? Which
Yeah.
is this lovely, large, sort of standalone building. Tell us about that.
So we very quickly outgrew the space that we were just talking about. We had added 2 more students, and then that was kind of the max we could fit. So I started looking at um, spaces, and I think in the back of my mind, I always had my eye out for the next thing. Like, where do we go from here? I think what I have discovered on this journey is that you have to have one foot firmly planted in the present. So you are like tapped into like what's going on in your school, but also recognizing it's a living, breathing thing. And like, where do we go next? So not just next year, but like, where are we 5 years from now?
Mm.
So relationship building has been really important. And our connection with this space actually grew out of me going and viewing a bunch of spaces that would never have worked.
Mm.
My husband was like, "Why are you going there? There's no way that that fits your needs." And I was like, "I don't know, because knowing what you don't want helps you figure out what you do want." But in my journey, I met somebody who connected us with an investor, and all of these pieces fell into place so that when this building was available, we were able to move on it pretty quickly and have funding in place. We spent we took over in February so that we could open the following school year. So spent 7 months renovating, I guess, painting and turning what was a physical therapy office into a school building. And the biggest piece of work was the outside space. I think is kind of creating a natural playground area. A lot of resources and time went into that over that
Yeah.
time period.
Yeah, and parents are flocking, right? You said you're up to about 36 students, kindergarten
Yeah,
to 5. What is attracting parents to Roots?
I think there's 2 camps. There's the people who are seeking us out right out of the gate for an alternative to kindergarten, and I feel like that's a natural entry point. People are looking at their children and they see this 4.5-year-old, 5-year-old who is in the dirt all day, and they can't quite make the leap from that to being inside for all but 2 20-minute recesses. That's a big jump. And so people will come to us for a gap year or a 5+ year, or to participate in our kindergarten program, and ultimately what happens is they stay.
Yeah.
So we're always, if a year of Roots is what you need, and that's fine too. But I think historically what happens is that people stay. And
Mm.
then
And
there's
that's a
another.
change, Jackie, right? Sorry, I want to go
Yeah,
back to your
go ahead.
second part of your question, but when I talked with you at your beautiful location in June, you had said that that was a little bit of a shift, that before kind of in the early days of running Roots, you were getting families who were kind of at some inflection point within the child's schooling. The traditional schooling wasn't
Yeah.
necessarily working out and they wanted a change. And now you're seeing families before their children even reach school age or are just reaching school age choose an alternative.
Yes, there's definitely both. I mean, that what you just described is that second kind of tangent of
Okay.
people, but there's definitely, I think people spent a lot of time with their kids during the pandemic in a
Yeah.
way that maybe we wouldn't have before. And then you see how they interact with the world. And I think there's also just there's growing conversation around it doesn't have to be one way. There's lots of different schools for lots of different people. And people are asking questions, I think, which is great. That's how I ended up here, was by asking questions.
Yeah. And I interrupted you, but I think you were about to say that there's that second group of parents who are looking for something different.
Yeah, the we have several students that have joined us this year. From all of them came from a prior public school experience in various school districts. And a lot of them are, benefit from a smaller classroom or individualized learning or having more time or needing to move their body. And so all things that you might find on someone's IEP or a 504 plan, but are just built into our day. So our way of being makes school more accessible for a certain contingent of student as well.
So, what differentiates Roots Academy and schools like yours, do you think, from what we would consider more traditional private schools? I get asked that question a lot like, oh, private schools have always been around. What's so special about these emerging schooling models? What would you say?
My response is totally colored by something that happened here like 10 minutes ago before we got on the call, and I joked that I was going to share it. Our oldest group of students, it's a third through fifth grade class. They had been, we have a local artist coming in, and so they were accessing art with her, and they had been with her for 15, like a 15-minute block of time. And when they went back to their regular classroom, before they transitioned into any other type of learning, their teacher took them outside and they were square dancing in the field behind the school. And the music was on. And I just watched them for like 15 minutes and there was so much joy on their face. And while I was doing that, I was talking to my assistant director and I was narrating all of the developmental things. I reconnect our mind and our body after doing something that might be higher demand, and the connection that I was seeing between students and just the overall like reestablishment of community cohesion and regulation following something that could be experienced as demanding. And I think that integration of like mind, body, and spirit, at least here at Roots, is something that makes us tremendously unique.
I love that. And it seems like that's very much what you were trying to do when you first created your yoga studio and your kind of family mindfulness business. And now, seeing it in more of this education space. When you reflect back on that journey, what does that make you think about?
Um, well, I feel really proud in sharing it with you right now. It's kind of when you start to go down a path, it's really easy to, and there's not really a ton of examples for how to do something. It's really easy to start to veer in the direction of like what's been done before. And so I think we are continuously as a school, and me personally as the director, like assessing what we're doing and asking questions and iterating and never really super attached to one, like this has to be this way. And so it takes a really special staff to be able to do that as well. And our staff has come from a variety of backgrounds. And so it's definitely like shaking off that old ideology of like, this is your packaged curriculum and this is what you do. And really like getting comfortable trusting yourselves and trusting the students. So it's like, it's its own little ecosystem. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your teachers. I asked what is attracting parents to Roots
Yeah.
Academy. What about your teachers? How are you finding them? And then what has that been like? I've talked to micro school founders and others who are running creative schooling programs like yours who'll say, I have lots of interest from teachers in working in my school or space, but they may have to do a lot of sort of professional development to get teachers to sort of recognize a different way of teaching and learning. I'm just curious about what you've been seeing in terms of recruitment and training of your instructors.
Yeah, think our staff, while all of our primary classroom teachers are Maine certified teachers, and they also have a background in something else. You know, there's a first degree in archaeology, and there's somebody whose their own schooling was a combination of homeschooling and forest schools and alternative schools in California. And there's someone else who has come to us with a marine biology degree and has traveled all over the world. And there's somebody who founded her own forest kindergarten program. And so at the core, you know, they are teachers, but they've explored all these other ways of being and doing in the world and learning. And I think so when I'm looking at candidates, which there are many of when we post a job, that's what I'm looking for, is not just like your teaching credentials, but like, what is your experience and knowledge outside of that, you know? And then also, like, what else do you bring with you that you're passionate about? I feel like that's the way that students really connect with adults, is when we're sharing something that we're passionate about. So for one of the teachers, it's music, and she's playing the guitar and there's singing coming from that classroom all day long. For another, it was archaeology, and she set up a dig and shared her pictures from Peru. And so I think it's not so much training people. I think it's looking for people who are ready and willing and want to bring more of themselves into their work, and like giving space for them to do that and helping them feel safe. So it's really like a relationship building on an administrative and staff level too. The same work we're doing
Mm.
with the kids, we're doing with each other as adults.
Ah, so great. So, what does the future hold for Roots? I know you've been growing leaps and bounds so far. You're at K-5. What's next?
Middle school. We're actively behind the scenes, fleshing out what our, Roots version of middle school looks like. And while it will have similar elements to what we're doing, it also is going to grow up a little bit, right, as the kids get older. So we're working on building some community partnerships and really wanting to lean into an experiential model for middle school where the kids are out in the community, which I think is opposite to what middle school normally looks like, right? It's time to get serious and we sit at our desks more. And in typical us fashion, I'm like, we're going to do the opposite of that. And let's get our hands into things more, and let's see how all of this learning applies out in the world.
And what about high school?
I don't know. There's never, my daughter says yes. My daughter is in our 5th grade class. And so we have grown with her every year. And I think that feels really intimidating. But what I've learned is that nothing is off the table. And it's really about having the right people around you. And I think when you're doing something that is in alignment with yourself and your community, like the right people come to you and kind of seem to be falling in your path. So we're open to anything.
I love that. Yeah, so that was going to be my other question for you, Jackie, sort of advice for aspiring school founders. You know, you launched Roots in the height of a pandemic. It was sort of making it up as you went along. What would your advice be to a founder who may want to create a similar program in non-pandemic conditions? What would you say for them to do?
I think one key to our success has been small and steady.
Mm.
There was a request and kind of interest in us going from K-1 to K-5 right away.
Mm.
And both because of space, and also I couldn't wrap my mind around how that was possible at the time. And so I think it just continues to be small, doable pieces, even though to some people the pieces are really big. The next steps seem really big. But I think each little step you take builds capacity for bigger steps down the road. Like you asked about high school, and I sort of laughed. But 2 years ago, I would have laughed if you said middle school. So I think it's just that continued be honest about what your capacity is and take small doable steps to move forward. And then I think people in the beginning, there's a lot of hustling and doing things yourself. And that's great because you can dictate the direction of everything and you can make quick decisions, but you can only do that for so long. It's pretty tiring carrying everything yourself. But finding the right people has been amazing. And then things grow in ways and directions that I could never have imagined myself. So, yeah.
Great. And what do you see as the future of education, and how do small innovative schools like Roots Academy fit into that?
Yeah. So my answer is twofold. I think Roots and small schools like us will continue to exist and continue to grow and multiply, and provide people and parents with options and choice. I think options and choice are really important in all areas of life. And I also hope that just by the fact of our existence, right, of these small schools doing something different, we're going to encourage more people to ask questions about the larger systems. And for so many reasons, a small school might not be accessible. And so I think it's really important that what we're piloting in these small, innovative, agile communities, like that needs to translate to what we're doing on a larger scale for all children in our country. The ability to access education that unites your mind, body, and spirit, and kind of sees all of you as something all kids should have access to, not just those that can find their way to a smaller alternative school.
Right. So, Jackie, if my listeners and viewers want to learn more about Roots Academy and connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can find us on Instagram at roots_let's play. We share a lot about what goes on in our classroom and our methodology there. And then you can find us at our website at www.rootslearningcommunity.com.
Well, I'm so excited to continue to follow your growth and success. It's great to see so many families benefiting from what you're providing, and great to see that you are finding such reward as an education entrepreneur. So, Jackie Gallo, best wishes, and thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thank you, Kerry.